don't care what it costs. I want to know what the truth is. And I hope that people, my son, anybody, if my name comes up, whether you like me, whether you agree with me or not, at least you could respect the fact that he's on a quest for truth. He's on a quest for truth.
Welcome to Skiba News Nation, bringing you unfiltered views, news, interviews, discussions, and more. And now, here's your host, Jeremiah Skiba, award-winning musician and son of Rob Skiba.
Today's guests have been endorsed by some of the most influential players in the health freedom movement. Laura Bartlett, founder of HospitalHostageHelp.com, and Greta Crawford, a 5-round remdesivir survivor. Listen to what investigative journalist April Moss said in the upcoming COVID documentary, Bad Medicine, produced by the same team behind Plandemic 1, 2, and 3. Let's play that clip.
But more importantly, we have to have an action plan. We don't want to just say a bunch of scary things, and yes, it's very heavy things that we are here. We're going to hear today, heavy things. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to give help. I want to let everybody know about an amazing organization. Many of you might have already heard about it. It's called the HospitalHostageHelp.com. Just raise your hand if you've heard of them before. Wow, I'm surprised. HospitalHostageHelp.com is founded by Laura Bartlett. And if you find yourself in the hospital or a loved one is in the hospital, you can call this hotline number and they will walk you through the steps of exactly what to say to the doctors and the nurses and the staff so that you can get the treatment that your loved one needs. So that number is 888-C19-3637. And that's HospitalHostageHelp.com. On that website, you are encouraged to go there now before you even need to go to the hospital. Print out the forms that are already written out for you. Get it notarized and have it in your car. Have copies in your car so that in the event that you have to go to the hospital, you have them already with you. You serve the papers to your doctor and he is put on notice that he must follow your wishes. It is not enough to go into the hospital and say, I don't want remdesivir. They will give it to you anyway.
Wow.
I'm really excited. Recently, Laura and Greta were able to be interviewed by perhaps one of the most prolific and iconic doctors in natural medicine, Dr. Joseph Mercola. Can we play that clip?
Well, to say I have a treat for you this week is a profoundly serious understatement. I have something that has the absolute potential to save not only your life, but the life of almost every single person you know and love. Best of all, it doesn't cost anything. It's free. It's a simple strategy that can protect you, insulate you from any of the damage that the hospitals can do. This document was developed as a revision of the well-known Jehovah's Witness capacity to refuse blood donations when they're in the hospital. Well-respected, non-controversial, no one gives them any hard work. But this legal document delivered in a specific way can absolutely, with virtually 100% confidence, make sure that you are never given anything against your will in the hospital. This has to be done before you get in the hospital. Otherwise, it won't work. So, amazing information. I can assure you, you have never seen anything like this before, so you need to share it far and wide. Everyone needs to do this.
So I just want to say welcome to Skiba News Nation, by the way. I forgot to say that before. Laura and Greta, ourpatientrights.com, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Whose is that? And can y'all tell me more about it?
Well, it's basically where you can find these documents that Dr. Mercola was talking about. You can go there, you can print these documents out. fill them out, get them notarized, make copies, and be sure to share it with all your family and keep them informed as to what's going on. And these documents help you assert your patient rights to informed consent and your wishes. So that's something you definitely want to have, which is something that has completely been ignored during this whole COVID period.
Mm-hmm.
Ourpatientrights.com, it's trending on Twitter with over 207,000 views. It's the brainchild of hospital patient advocate Laura Bartlett, founder of hospitalhostagehelp.com, and Greta Crawford, a 5-round remdesivir survivor and founder of the website Protocol Kills, which has been seen on billboards around America, including New York's Times Square. And I don't know if you know this, Greta, but I wrote a book documenting my husband's death, and I didn't know about your website, but it's called The Protocol That Kills. theprotocolthatkills.com. So when I went to get the domain and I found Protocol Kills, I was like, wow, this is already done. It's already done. So we kind of use it as a reference to the book, because really what I'm excited about is you guys have found the solution, and not only that, it's working. So can you talk about that? How you've seen it working?
Right. So, I was helping people who were scared. They felt bullied. They were terrified of what was happening in the hospital for either themselves or their loved ones, and they felt hopeless because in a lot of cases they felt like if they were to even inquire, what's going on with my loved one, that it would make matters worse. That we kept hearing, I don't know what to do, they're not listening, the doctor's not listening to me. It doesn't look like they really they're not sharing the plan to help them get out of here. We feel like prisoners, and I'm afraid to do anything. So anyway, I started a hotline so that people could reach out. We're very oriented where people can talk to somebody. When you're in a crisis, Sheila, that you don't have the capacity, the emotional or mental capacity in a lot of respects, to start doing a lot of research on the internet to figure out, how do I get out of this situation? And so if you can just talk to somebody, that's a big help. We have hotlines for everything. So I started a hotline so that people could be connected quickly to somebody who could direct them to information about their basic patient rights, because they weren't being reminded of it in the hospital. And the problem was at the very beginning of COVID, or even just as recent as the last couple of months, people still are under the belief that if they just go to the hospital, everything's taken care of. The doctor will do what they need to do in the best interest of your loved one or yourself if you're the patient. And as we all know, that wasn't the case in the last couple of years. And rather than try, negotiate your way out of the situation, which is what I helped a lot with the hotline, negotiating basically with the doctor for better treatment or different treatment, it's better if you just are prepared before you even go in. So this is what we're here to talk about today, is not chase the problem after it happens, but get ahead of the problem, be prepared. When's the best time to have a parachute if you're skydiving? It's before you even step on the plane, have that parachute on. You don't wait after you're plummeting towards Earth to put a parachute on. It's not going to work. So we have a document that, as you heard Dr. McCullough very enthusiastically endorse, is novel, it's new. It is something that is groundbreaking. It will change the hospital culture, I believe, very quickly if we can get more people to understand it and do it before you even go into the hospital. And so that's what we're here today to really enthusiastically champion, is this document at ourpatientrights.com.
Awesome. Do you want me to play that video now of the hospital patient testimonials?
Sure.
Okay, let's play that clip.
There is no limit to the evil that's in the hospitals. The patient is the last person on their list of things they're concerned about.
I think everybody in our movement is Please, please, God, do not let me land on someone I love in hospital.
These two ladies have become most instrumental in the boots on the ground fight. They were instrumental in the hospital rescue that we did.
And she sent me the medical directives form via email. And she said, yes, this is a critical document.
The hospitals would lie to people and pretend like they could refuse to let people out of the hospitals. Matter of fact, I think there were many cases in which the hospitals could have been reported for kidnapping.
And we've got absolute experts and people with solutions.
That has helped patients and families from coast to coast. Take this number down. I'm telling you, you never know when a friend, a neighbor, someone you love, anybody. 1-888-C-19-3637. Write it down, screenshot it, whatever you got to do.
I found Protocol Kills. I called the number. Within moments, I was able to get connected.
Laura just so graciously shared so much information with me and worked with me and my family throughout the whole process.
We had her off oxygen in 30 hours after getting her on budesonide, and she's healed.
If we didn't have Laura, you guys to talk with, we would never have known questions to ask.
I mean, she was so great because we would call her and say, this is what they said now. And she's like, not true.
And that's why this hotline thing is huge. To be able to speak to somebody on the phone and have a peace of mind and feel encouraged to know, okay, so the fact that we got Grandma out, I was like, oh my gosh, like it was like such a fight.
But I wouldn't have known anything if it wasn't for Laura. And thank God, we ended up saving my mom's life.
Reach out for help and then be confident.
Well, actually, thank you to all of you. You are three remarkable human beings doing amazing work. You're doing God's work, and I feel much safer.
The hostage hotline. People need to know what's really happening out there, and they need to know there's hope, that there's help out there. There are folks who understand how the hospitals work now, understanding that patients do have rights. They're working helping people get out of the hospital.
These two are real, and I know it because I've gotten to know them. They don't take any money for doing this. They are truly in this fight because they care.
So I want to share something that I found after my husband's death that he had written on social media. And it's, I am a healthy person with a God-given functioning immune system. I was created in the image and likeness of the Creator, who tells me that my body meant to be a temple, that is meant to be a temple for the indwelling of His Holy Spirit. Thus, I refuse to corrupt my temple/body with potentially harmful substances, foreign genetic code, and things identified in Scripture as unclean and an abomination. Neither you, the government, nor anyone else has the right to force a medical procedure on me in violation of virtually every medical ethics standard, including the Nuremberg Code. So, during my crisis, I did reach out to Laura, and unfortunately it was a little too late. But as great as this is, you really need to do the documents. The documents are what, they're not going to care what you say. The documents are what's going to save you if you happen to go, and not just forget about COVID. If you go in with a broken arm or after a car accident, it doesn't matter what the cause is. If you go in for a knee replacement, whatever, you have to have this before you get there.
Greta is going to tell her story and how we met, and why she wished she had this document before.
Okay.
Yeah. So the dynamics of the hospital have completely changed since before COVID. With my own personal experience in the hospital, I noticed that things were set up in a way that it wasn't advantageous for the patient. It wasn't helpful for the patient. It was almost an assault to the patient. The family member, for me, my husband wasn't allowed in initially when they started giving me this concoction of poison. At the time they told me you're going to get a COVID medication. So then I didn't know any better to ask any questions. I had never heard of remdesivir before. Didn't know really to be aware of this situation. I think now we're in a time period where people understand what the hospitals have done with the protocol. And so people are more aware of that. That's why it's so important to have documents on hand. Because during my stay, I was harassed constantly by my pulmonologist to get vaccinated day and day again. They threatened me with the ventilator. I did have enough knowledge about the ventilator, which I told my doctor, you're murdering people with the ventilation, and she didn't deny it at all. Her defense was, well, we give what people request, which is a total lie. No one goes in the hospital requesting to be put on life support. That's ridiculous. So I knew at that point that things in the hospital were completely strange, but I didn't know that I was being poisoned either. But I did know that I got extremely, I got near death in the hospital where I wasn't before. When I got oxygen, I felt great, and I thought I was going to go home. And then I got this COVID medication, and it nearly took my life. But while I was in there, you know when something is wrong. And when I was able to get out, I was able to research and find out exactly what was happening. And that's why it's so important to have these documents that we're going to talk about before you go in the hospital. Because when you're in the hospital, it's your word against the doctors, and they control the medical records. So they control what's put in there, how the tone of the conversation is, things like that. And they have complete control. But if you have these documents prepared and ready to go, then you take back your control. You can tell the doctor, this is what my wishes are. This is what I want to have, happen. This is what I consent to. This is what I don't consent to. And it's notarized. It's delivered by the appropriate methods. And there's really no getting around that. So you take back control where, and you're no longer at the mercy of the doctor in the hospital. So that's what's so important about these documents, and that's what I found after creating Protocol Kills. We didn't want to just scare people. We wanted to have a solution. And this right here is the solution. If you are willing to stand up and assert your rights, it's going to take effort on your part to do that. But then you have to ask, how much is my life worth? Is it worth printing out some documents and educating myself and educating my family and friends? I would say so, especially in these times. Everyone needs to do this.
Yeah, no, so my mom's book is kind of like an inside story of what happened to my dad in the hospital, and it actually kind of goes hand in hand. Can you tell?
Yeah, so my husband was a whistleblower. I mean, he had been screaming from the mountaintops, something's wrong, they're shutting churches down, everybody was putting on masks, and he could see the writing on the wall. So he was actively helping people get medical exemptions from the jab, and was shut off Facebook for 2 months in a row. And his oxygen saturation got down to 70, and I was getting medication from American Frontline Doctors. So I called them and I told them that his oxygen saturation had dropped, and they told me to take him to the ER. Well, I didn't know my local hospital had turned into a kill shelter. I didn't know that. And I also didn't know they were going to be stripping us apart at the door. If I had known that, I would have never taken him. So they literally kept me from him for 21 days. And so I'm just so thankful. I called Laura to tell her about my book I had just published, and then you tell me that, you have something that can work, that can help people. The book was meant to save lives. I felt obligated with Rob's vast audience to share the inside story. So when a doctor called me from my husband's phone on day 2, yelling at me, telling me that my husband was going to die if he did not get put on a ventilator, I knew that was a lie. He knew that was a lie. And then he said, do you want your husband to die? My mom and sister were right with me. I thought, what is going on? Since when did doctors yell in front of the patient that they're going to die if they don't do a certain procedure? So after that, I started recording every single call. Even when I got in, every single phone call with a doctor, nurse, administrator was recorded. We wouldn't have the book unless I had done that. I wasn't ever expecting him to die. I was expecting to show him the hell that I had gone through, and maybe he would write a book, because he's published 8 books. But after his death and studying these records for thousands of hours, I have a couple, Roberta and Alan Stalvey, helped me write the book, and then it also has a legal aspect to it throughout the book of the things we learned after his death. We also did a private autopsy. Jeremiah was adamant that we do that. We've yet to get COVID off the death certificate. I don't know if they'll ever do it without going to court over it, but it didn't show COVID anywhere on it. And of course, we all know it's their toxic medications that kill. Also, there's a misnomer with the right to try. You don't have a right to try unless you have this paper filled out, because what right to try means, try everything that they want to give you, and then if you survive, then they may let you try some, and usually it's very minuscule amount of budesonide and the other things that you're requesting. So that's a
Well, here's the main deal, is that people, you used the word, the pronoun they, and I think that people are to believe that there is a they. There is no they. I'm just going to clear that up. It is a he or she. It is the doctor who is attending to your care, who's doing the care plan, who's prescribing the medication from the pharmacy in the hospital, and then there's a note in the record for somebody to dispense it, which will be, or to administer it, which will be the nurse. But it's only the doctor. It's not the nurse. It's not the hospital administration. It's not the WHO. It's not Tedros. It's not Klaus Schwab. It's none of the usual villains that everybody spend a lot of time talking about. Very little has been talked about the only person who could have, your husband. You could have ordered him to be put on a ventilator. The only might have lied to your husband or yourself or many others that he couldn't leave the hospital. It's only the doctor. No, they.
I knew that. I knew that fact, that it was the doctors, their contractors, that work for the hospital. So I literally was going to, we had pictures of all of them from the internet. I was gonna, find him in the parking lot and beg him, if he really wanted my husband to live, that he would let me in. And of course that day he decided not to show up to work. But anyway, it wouldn't have worked anyway, but they know this is critical. This is critical information. I'm so thankful for both of you for the hotline, but before the hotline, get these documents. I'm begging my family, everybody here is going to be having this in their car. Have your spouse have a copy. It's very important not to get to that part where I was and Greta was, because it's too late. It's too late. If you don't have this and you go in, it's too late. Go ahead.
I think at this point we need to just kind of jump in and explain how they work and why, because I think a lot of people think there's something out there like this already. There is not, unless you're a Jehovah's Witness and you don't want blood. This is patterned after something that has been around for decades, I believe. And it is a document that Jehovah's Witnesses carry with them. We were fortunate enough to actually, 2 or 3 days before we talked to Dr. Joseph Mercola, had the good fortune of, well, I didn't, but Greta had 2 Jehovah's Witnesses come to her door, and we got to actually ask. We had already had the document, of course, but we always said, wait, if God would send Jehovah's Witnesses across our path so we could be literal Jehovah's Witness, how does it work for you if you don't want blood transfusions? Because they, in their faith, they don't want a blood transfusion. According to their faith, they can't have one. And so they have a document that they put in their wallet, their purse, and the hospital is notified the moment their feet touch in the hospital. This document that we have provided at ourpatientrights.com, it is patterned after something that works. We got the idea from a hospital insider that was really desperately trying to figure out how we could get the consent wishes, things you consent to and things you absolutely do not consent to, notice to the doctor. We already knew the workaround. We had a prior document that was 2 or 3 versions ago that was working in a lot of cases, but it was a struggle. It was not, it didn't have the secret sauce, which is putting this is based on my deeply held religious and spiritual belief. That's very important, because that's what the premise of the Jehovah's Witness document that tells the hospital, the doctor, more importantly, I do not want a blood transfusion. And if it's in writing and it's part of your deeply held religious and spiritual beliefs, there's a precedent for not giving that person blood, even throughout COVID. So even with the PrEP Act, with all the COVID shielding that hospitals received legally, where people could not sue and win during COVID, this document, regardless of whatever COVID protocol they want to throw at them, even with a diagnosis of COVID, For instance, if they had a steroid, which is common as part of the protocol for COVID, administered to that patient, and that patient had a incident or a proclivity to have a bleeding incident from a bleeding ulcer, and the steroid kind of agitated that as part of the COVID protocol, and the treatment would be to give a blood transfusion. That patient that had that document, that Jehovah's Witness, would not get that remedy of a blood transfusion. So that's how powerful this document is. We know that this insider who gave us this tip had reported back in her days working in the upper levels of administration for a hospital that there was a woman that had been in a very serious car accident, and she was a Jehovah's Witness. She was young. Probably there's a chance she would have had she gotten a blood transfusion, and she said no. The hospital begged her to get a blood transfusion, but they had to respect her written consent to deny a blood transfusion. They respected it. Unfortunately, she passed. But that's how powerful a document that you have done before you go into the hospital, notarized, signed in front of a notary, and then delivered in the very specific legal way that we advise per our hospital insider, which is certified mail, return receipt request. The steps are noted on our patient right, and also a backup way that puts the hospital on notice that by a legal courier service, a courier service that would deliver like legal documents. You can just Google it. You can find them almost in every city in America. You can find one, and they will deliver it. They'll have to sign for it. It'll be dated. So the hospital is put on notice, and it's not just the nebulous hospital. It'll be delivered to the CEO of the hospital. Why the CEO? The reason why you send it to the CEO is because the CEO is tasked with all the affairs of the hospital. And so when they see this legal document delivered, the day they get it, I am certain they will do something with it, because usually it's a legal matter if it's certified, mailed, return receipt requested. And that CEO will immediately, trust me, he will look at it because he's on the hook now. You got this served to you legally. It's time stamped, it's dated, it's signed, it's notarized, and it will immediately, per the AMA Code of Ethics 2.1.1, it states that once your consent wishes, I'm going to paraphrase, once your consent wishes are put in writing, reduced to writing, it has to be put into the electronic medical record. Why is that important? Because every doctor, every care provider that is attending, say, to your husband, Sheila, Rob's care, they would have seen it. Everybody would see this document in the electronic medical record, and trust me, they are familiar with this. They are trained in medical school, nursing school, bioethics, that you respect somebody's written consent. And so they would not deny that. And let's say there are psychopaths out there, and we know that they do exist.
So I have a question.
If the decides they're going to intentionally violate this document that's in writing, that's been served legally in 2 ways, that's put on the electronic medical record, and they do that, you have the receipts. Like you would have.
I was going to say, another important aspect about this is that, we had the good fortune of having some Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door, and Laura was on the phone with me, and we asked them questions about their documents that they use. And they have contacts that they reach out to in case of an emergency. They have a community around them that understands what their beliefs are and how to get those beliefs enforced. And so they have these contacts listed that they can reach out to in case of an emergency. And that's what we're saying here too. You need to have, at least 3 contacts that have a copy of your documents and your wishes notarized, and the instructions with them too. So that way, if you are in, an emergency situation and you go to the hospital, you call your emergency contacts and say, hey, those forms on, the side of the fridge that I told you in case of emergency, certify, mail them to this hospital, and then get them courier service delivered to this hospital as well. And that way, you can trust on those people. They understand what your wishes are. It's easy to follow the instructions, and that you can trust them to get that done as soon as possible. So that way, when you're in the emergency room, people have said, well, do you hand it over to them? Yes, you will have your own copy that you carry in your car or whatever. Like the Jehovah's Witnesses, they carry their document with them wherever they go. And when you hand it over, some people are like, well, what if the doctor doesn't want it? Well, then you say, that's all right. I just want to let you know that these documents are in the process of being delivered certified mail and courier service, and to your CEO. So your CEO will have these documents concerning on how your treatment plan is going to be directly to me. And I would think that doctor would definitely pick up those papers at that point if he knew that his boss was going to have this document before he did. And then he would definitely read that and understand it immediately. So, but that's what's important, is you have that network of people that understand this situation, and they should have the documents too. You can be their emergency contact, but we all need to start taking care of each other and working together. And that's an important aspect of these documents.
Right. There's one more aspect that that was an epiphany to me when I was hearing somebody's terrible story in a hospital where they were being bullied, coerced. Unfortunately, the spouse died in the hospital, and I had had it up to here, helping people and hearing these stories. And I said, that's it. I said, Nancy, I promise you, I'm revising that document, and that doctor who was deliberately, intentionally, willfully disregarding your patient right to informed consent, if I had this to do over again, he would get the revised document that said there will be consequences to him. And I said, I will do that. I make a promise to you that I'm going to revise those documents, and I'm going to add a phrase to that document that says that there will be consequences to any physician who willfully disregards my informed consent on this document, and will be immediately reported to the state medical board. Now, why is that important? It's important because doctors cannot practice medicine without a medical license. And so they have a fork in the road. Say they wanted to go along and get along to whatever the hospital wanted them to do. If it was forcing a medication, coercing a patient to get a COVID jab, any kind of vaccine that they did not want, anything they did not want, and they clearly articulated they did not want. If the patient says they didn't want it, but the doctor's got a moral dilemma, do I just go along and get along so I can keep my job and not get fired, and maybe even lose my privileges at this hospital because it'll upset them? Or do I risk losing my license by having to defend it in front of a state medical board? Because every complaint to the state medical board in whatever state you're at has to investigate those complaints. And it's going to cost time, it's going to cost money, it's going to be emotional. You can avoid all that if you just do the thing that you said you would do during your training, which is a duty per the AMA Code of Ethics 2.1.1, which is to respect a patient's informed consent. It is that important. You're trained as a doctor on this. You know it. You just disregarded it during COVID.
So I have a question for you, because in the records, my husband's records, he told them 17 times, and I'm sure Greta did too. So what makes it different? Even the doctor says wife thinks we're going to hurt her husband. You know, they do not want remdesivir. They do not want to be put on a ventilator. He even had a band on his arm. What makes saying that, it's in the record, in his record, what makes it different than this? Can you
You'd have to ask the Jehovah's Witness faith that why during COVID, that something as important as a blood transfusion when you're bleeding out, you you would think logically, most of us who are not would say, yeah, I did get, that even makes logical sense. There's a precedent for getting a blood transfusion if you have low blood volume and you're going to die. But they respected it. All this is predicated on the actions of a document similar that worked. It was not good enough to just say it. It didn't work when people said, I don't want this, doctor. Please do not give me a COVID jab. For instance, a 93-year-old that I was helping with a rescue out of a hospital, she had said no less than 5 times, I don't want it. Let me be very clear. The moment she came into the hospital, she said, I do not want a COVID injection of any sort. And they, day after day after day, coerced her, bullied her, and she had had enough. She said, Laura, I'm afraid that if I fall asleep tonight, that they're going to give it to me while I'm in my sleep, and they will misconstrue, they will say that I gave my implied consent if I mumbled in my sleep, sleep talking or just being confused because she's half asleep if someone walked in her room. She did not want to take that anymore. So you know how she had to get out because she didn't have this document. She did not document. So it's more of a battle to have to just get yourself rescued out. So what she did was she left and she's alive today. She's 94. The family told me she had made it to her 94th birthday. So the way she did that without a document was she literally had to remove her from the circumstance, from the environment. We don't want people to have to do that. We want what worked for Jehovah's Witness for decades to work for all faiths, all beliefs. I'm a Christian. We don't want anyone to prematurely die, and we want their bodily autonomy respected as it should be. And so the way to do that is to follow a template or a blueprint that works, which is a document that's very similar to the Jehovah's Witness they use, and they carry it with them. They give copies, to their trusted ones in their life. Like we advise, we say make 10 copies of this thing after it's notarized and signed. And you're going to educate. You're going to have a conversation. This is what was missing during COVID. People didn't have conversations, critical conversations they needed with the ones in their life that they would have to rely on. And so you're going to, while you're well, while I am perfectly fine outside of a hospital, I'm going to have this document signed, notarized. I'm going to complete it, tailored to my wishes. You can alter it if you want. This is just a template at ourpatientrights.com. There's blank spaces in there. If you don't see something that's on there that you can just initial, add it. Initial it next to where you've added, I don't want whatever it is, XYZ, this medication, or I have an allergy to whatever. Everybody's different. Tailor it, sign it in front of a notary, make 10 copies, keep a copy for yourself, keep the original in a safe place, give copies to your trusted ones who you've had a conversation with the instructions stapled to the top of it. And you say, look, in the event that I'm in a hospital, you're the person I'm going to call. I'm trusting you. Pick people you can trust, people that have some backbone, people who will fight literally for your life. Those people, don't just pick the person that you like the same movies with, or happens to just be born, in your family with you. It's sibling who will literally go to the mat for you. And then those people will be educated. They'll have the conversation. They'll have your document. And when you're in the hospital, you let them know, hey, that document, do the instructions. First thing in the morning, if the post office is closed, go to the post office and get it certified mailed and sent to the CEO per the instructions. It's all there. Okay, and they'll do the same for you. Your 3 people or 4 people that have this document, they're going to give you their document. We're all going to help each other out. We're not going to be lone wolves anymore. We're not going to just be defenseless, helpless on an island by ourselves in the hospital system anymore. It's going to change. We're going to help each other out. And we're going to be prepared before we even walk in. You remember the analogy of having a there's that thing called parachute. Having a parachute on you before you jump out of a plane. We're not going to flail around in the air before we hit ground looking for the parachute. That's not the time to do it. Do it before you jump out of a plane. Do it before you go into the hospital. And I hate to use an analogy that strong, but we all know in the last 3 years, that's the way people felt. They felt like they had just jumped out of a plane and were helpless and hopeless. And I don't want that for anyone anymore. Neither does Greta. And that's why we do what we do for free. It's more missionary work at this point.
What happened during COVID is basically it was your word against the doctor's word. And even if you had told the doctor, I don't want this medication, I don't want that, they could have said, oh, they're delirious with sickness and they're just saying all kind of strange things. They didn't know what they really wanted. So we went ahead and gave him the remdesivir, even though he said no. He was just so out of it, or they can make up just anything because during COVID, the shield covers for malpractice. But with these documents, you have laid out what you want, what your wishes are, backed by your religious and spiritual beliefs, before you have ever been in a situation where you're sick. So you're a very sound mind, you're a very conscious state, and then you have these delivered. There's no way to say, we misinterpreted something. It's in black and white. It's right there. And your wishes will be respected at that point, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses. You can't say, well, we respect Jehovah's Witnesses, but we don't respect your religious beliefs. That's not how it works in America. So at that point, it's no longer the doctor's word against your word. It's in black and white, it's in writing, and it's there to enforce your wishes and assert your rights.
Now, a question that most people will ask, and we've heard this asked in interviews in the past, is, but don't you sign a general consent? Don't you do that at the very beginning of the process? Yes, you do, because for a hospital to get paid and to bill for insurance, to do anything to you as far as a treatment, they need your consent. It's a general consent. I don't have a slide to show you, but you can just Google general hospital consent and find it. The language on most general consents is that, yes, you have my permission. You can do something to me. It's a general consent. Now, your consenting to that is almost implied through the process from that point on that you're implying your consent to everything. That's why you need a carve-out document, such as this one, or for Jehovah's Witness, their document. It's a carve-out. It's saying, I specifically don't want these things, because it's not going to list every possible treatment in that general consent. It's not going to list every medication that you could possibly get or every intervention like a ventilator. So you need to have your own document. And by the way, that general consent is a contract between you and the hospital. It's not between you and the doctor. The doctor will not be indemnified by the hospital. What does that mean? Say they violate this informed consent, the hospital's not going to have their back. They're not going to legally have their back and protect them. They're not going to provide them legal cover, because contract between the patient and the doctor, that's what was missing through the whole 3 years of all the devastation, all the horrific stories. Some of them are on Greta's website, protocolkills.com, and like your own, Sheila, with Rob, horrific, terrible, in my opinion, criminal.
Just criminal.
But what might have prevented all this? People have walked in mass with a carve-out document between me and that doctor in the lab coat at the end of my bed, and it says, "Hey, buddy, these are things I don't want. You've been served these legally in the electronic medical record. If you do something, say I did not want to, for whatever reason, this is just a hypothetical, and you cut me, you make an incision for surgery, that's an intentional tort. That's battery at that point. If I said, don't stick something in my arm in the way of a needle, and you did that, that's an intentional tort. That is intentionally going against my wish. You knew better. You knew I didn't want that. Yeah. And so that's why this is powerful. It's not to be, like Greta said, it's not mumbling something. It's not giving your implied consent, not interpreted after the fact of hypoxic. They said they didn't want it, but I really mean that because they really didn't know what they were talking about. They were delirious. They were emotional. Whatever excuse they want to give it. No, I'm of sound mind. I'm outside the hospital. I'm well, and I'm walking in with this document that was notarized before I ever needed it. So I know what I want. You know what I want. And if you violate it, there's going to be consequences. And trust me, no doctor wants to have to go argue that case where there's literally the receipts in front of a state medical board. Tell you what, if a state medical board disregards it, there's some problems with the state medical board and they'll be investigated.
And one of the first bullet points on this document, it says, before any medication is even ordered, I want to know what are the risks, the benefits, the alternatives, and then after understanding and researching this, I will make a decision whether I consent to it or whether I do not consent to it. And that is what informed consent is, which is what doctors should have been giving throughout this whole process, but they haven't. But with this document, you are actually holding them to what their job standards are, to give the patient informed consent about everything. And many of them said, well, it's an emergency situation. That's completely false. An emergency situation is when, you are having a heart attack and you are almost passed out and they're going to do CPR on you and to try to bring you back to life. In that situation, you really can't give consent because you're in the process of dying. But like with me, when they gave me oxygen, I actually thought I was going to go home that night. I thought, okay, this is great. And they told me, no, you're going to get this COVID medication. That's not informed consent at all. And I had the capacity to decide whether or not I wanted it. Before they gave me this poison, is what I call it, they asked me, are you vaccinated? And I said, no, I'm not vaccinated. I don't believe in experimental drugs. I'm not a lab rat. Those were my words. And at that point in time, this nurse proceeded to inject an experimental drug into my veins after I explicitly said, I don't believe in them. I'm not a lab rat. So that right there tells you that they will go to any lengths. They don't care. This is the thing. They know about informed consent. They've been taught about it in medical school, and they know they're supposed to give it to patients. But they think that with COVID, everything's an emergency, even though at that point in time, I could have clearly made a decision on what I wanted. So people don't need to conflate the two types of emergencies, and know that with these documents, that clarifies that completely. You're going to be telling me about every medication you give me, and I will be giving you my consent based on my research and your information that you gave me.
I want to make this super easy for our audience. So ourpatientrights.com. Can we just read through this real quick and let them see how easy this is? Because it's not hard and everybody needs to do it. So can we do that? You want to read it, Greta?
Sure. Quick here.
I just want the audience to know that it's not complicated. It's something that could save your life. So I just want them to know where to go, and we'll put it up on the screen. They'll know where to go, and then let's read through this.
So the first part of it says, and you put your name, advise all physicians and nurses and other caregivers that this caregivers and consent document reflects my current wishes for my care and carefully planned and intentional wishes. Now, before I go on, I want to say that current wishes, a lot of people say, well, I have advanced directives. That is not the same as your current wishes. Advanced directives tells you what you wish to happen in case you are not able to communicate if you're incapacitated. Whereas these current wishes, this is what you are wanting right now. As you're able to communicate, it's just in writing. Now I'll go on. This caregivers and consent document also reflects my deeply held religious and spiritual beliefs. Please ensure that this caregivers and consent document is clearly accessible in the electronic medical records at all times for all of my care providers. And that is something per the AMA that they have to do once they receive it in writing. Receipt of this caregivers and consent document by the hospital serves as notice that I will report to the medical board any physician who violates my carefully planned and intentional wishes that are based upon my deeply held religious and spiritual beliefs and are delineated within the caregivers and consent document. So that's another important thing is, if you don't adhere to this, we will report you. And then it goes on in detail with my carefully planned and intentional wishes that are based upon my deeply held religious and spiritual beliefs include, as I said, the first one, which is basically what informed consent is. I do not consent to the use of medications without my being informed of each medication's risks, benefits, and alternatives before they are ordered. That way there's no confusion that you have stuff ordered and standing by. Only after the information is communicated shall I choose to either grant consent or not grant consent of each and every medication that is ordered. And then it goes on to get more specific with, I do not consent to receiving any vaccine or booster for COVID-19 or COVID-19 variant. I do not consent to receiving the seasonal flu vaccine. I do not consent to receiving the, I can't even pronounce it correctly, but pneumococcal vaccine, pneumonia vaccine. I do not consent to receiving any vaccination for any purpose or disease. I do not consent to the use of remdesivir, or it's generically called Veklury, or any other drug related to remdesivir or Veklury under any circumstance. I do not consent to the use of baricitinib, or its brand name Omulant, for COVID-19 or COVID-19 variant. And then it goes on to say, I request and consent the use of 1 milligram of budesonide via nebulizer every 4 to 6 hours for COVID-19 or COVID-19 variant diagnosis with respiratory issues. I do not consent to a ventilator in the case of COVID-19 or COVID-19 variant diagnosis without consultation with my regarding the risks, benefits, and alternatives prior to the implementation of a ventilator. Only after the information is communicated to me shall I choose to either grant consent or not grant consent for the ventilator in case of the COVID-19 or COVID-19 variant diagnosis. Now, as you know with this, the ventilator was pushed almost immediately when a patient got in the hospital. Some patients had 91% or 80% oxygen, which is not a call for a ventilation at that point. Some people walk around with lower rates of oxygen. So in this case, it allows you to assess whether you are actually going to need it in case there is an underlying event where you might actually need a ventilator. But before it's ever pushed on you, you have to be consulted and you have to give that consent. The next one is I do not consent to medications related to any COVID-19 protocol or COVID-19 variant protocol without my first conducting an independent evaluation regarding the side effects or risks associated with the COVID-19 protocol. So basically anything else they come out with that they want to try to use, especially as an experimental drug, you're saying in this statement that you are going to have a specific approval given before any medication is given to you regarding COVID under an emergency or anything else they say. The next is I request and consent to the implementation of alternative treatments. Now, we can't guarantee you that they're going to give you treatments like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, but you at least have it in writing that you consent to this. The next is I request and consent to the use of all life-saving measures. If I consent to my discharge to hospice level care, I request and consent that I be provided oxygen, nutrition, hydration, medication, and any other equipment necessary for comfort. So a lot of times the patients were denied food, they were denied water, they were denied the basic things to sustain life. And in this situation, you're telling them, no, this is what I'm requesting. So you can't deny me this. I do not consent to receiving any blood transfusion that contain blood products derived from COVID-19 vaccinated donors or COVID-19 variant vaccinated donors. And then it goes on to say, I do not consent to receiving any processed food, which is this is something Dr. Mercola actually wanted to add in here. Because the products such as high fructose corn syrup and seed oils can hinder the healing process. And then you can add any extra things like what you're allergic to or any personal things that you do not consent to. But with all of these, if you print out the form, you can just initial by the ones that you choose. If you want a flu vaccine, then just don't sign that part, and then you'll be able to receive it. But it also says another important statement here before we close is that all the items in this caregivers and consent document shall remain in effect unless I choose to revoke in writing. No one else may alter or amend this caregivers and consent document. So basically, they can't say, well, she changed her mind. We went in there and asked her, and she said, yeah, just go ahead and forget about that consent form. No, it's got to be in writing and witnessed and signed. And then, of course, you get it notarized and deliver it in the method that we were explaining earlier on how it needs to be delivered. That is very, very vital in delivering it the right way. Otherwise, this may not get seen or may get just thrown out.
This is brilliant. And, I really know that this would have saved my husband's life. And I want to ask you, if you're out of town, because you mentioned CEO of a hospital, what happens if you're out of town and you have this situation? I know you can have this printed in your car, but how would you get that delivered?
Right. So that's, remember the conversation with your trusted friends or
Team,
family
yeah.
that have the copy. You're going to notify them immediately. You're going to let your family know, hey, if this happens and I'm incapacitated, that phone call, these are the three people. They should have a copy. Frankly, your family should have a copy too. Make 10 copies. They're going to immediately know. The hospital say they're a Jane Doe, right? They're a Jane Doe, and they've been brought, maybe even clunked in the head, and you're unconscious. You're in the emergency room, and you can't make that call for yourself. Then other family members can step in because they're going to look for who's the person to call next of kin. Hospitals have a way of letting people know. And that person should step up and do the things that you already had a conversation about. They're going to have the instructions, remember, stapled on their copy that's of the notarized signed document. And then they're going to go into action mode, and they're going to do the steps. They're going to get a certified mail when the post office opens, if it's after hours, the very first thing the next morning. And they're going to have it couriered to the hospital. So it's going to take a conversation with some other people. This isn't just something you do as solely just on yourself, and you're not relying on anybody. You're going to have to rely on our friends, our family, people we trust with our life. We can't just go it alone. We learned how that worked in the last 3 years. And we're really trying to move the needle and change things in the hospital culture. And I believe this document will do that if people actually take the time and prepare. My favorite saying is, be prepared, not scared. Just have your parachute before you jump out of a helicopter. You need to have your life preserver on before you go into deep water we just need to have that kind of preparedness before we ever embark in the hospital system ever again. And hospitals serve a good purpose. They do have a purpose. If you are in a situation like a multi-car wreck and you've been brought to the hospital by ambulance and you're unconscious and bleeding out, you bet I'm not going to try to wing it at home. I'm going to go to an emergency room where they're a trauma center that is skilled to take care of these kinds of things. But I also don't want, in my personal document, I don't want COVID or any vaccine while I'm in a hospital. If I wanted one of those, I can get it in a number of places. I can get it at CVS, Walgreens. Nobody's around with a needle when I'm there to pick up shampoo. Okay, so it's ridiculous that while you're partially incapacitated, you're laying in a hospital bed, maybe tethered to machines, that's when they would do it. If I said I did not want it, that is wrong, and it's going to be there's going to be some consequences if they got my document that said that.
And it's never happened before. When you've gone to the hospital, you've gone for a specific acute ailment. So it's never happened before where they would try to vaccinate you while you're there when your body is already under duress and is, your immune system is possibly in the process of being compromised or compromised. They really have never done that before. So why? I mean, it's just strange that they're trying to do it now. But like we said, it's better to be prepared. And even if you're out of state, the mail service is going to deliver everywhere, and you can find a courier within that area or proximity of the hospital. That's why it's good to have your emergency contacts on hand and ready to go with this information.
I find it interesting. They targeted people, in my opinion, who were unvaccinated. And when they stripped me apart from my husband, the only one question they wanted to know about his medical history was he vaccinated? I said, no. What does that have to do with anything? Since when have they asked about your vaccination record? And he even had, he was holding his own for a couple of days. They even moved him to the 5th floor, and I told him, you're safe there. All you need is oxygen. But then they, tricked him to go back downstairs. And if you have, this is another thing, if you think you have it covered with having somebody that has medical power of attorney, don't think you're safe, because I have medical power of attorney. It did me no good. Right. It did me no good. So it's really is the only way to put your parachute on and be prepared in case you have to jump, because you don't want to be without this.
Right. That's why the current care form is so important, because they're going to make it be a situation between the doctor and the patient. They don't want any outside influence from it. That serves as a witness, and it also serves as somebody who is able to think clearly and logically. If it's between a patient who is not thinking clearly and a doctor, that doctor can pretty much control the whole situation. And that's what they did with this. So that's why these documents say current care. This is what I want right now as I'm sitting here, whether I'm able to speak it clearly or not to you, but I'm conscious. This is what I want. This is why these documents are different from any other document out there, and why they can trump a medical power of attorney, because that doesn't kick in until the patient is completely incapacitated and cannot communicate in any way. That's when the medical power of attorney comes in.
Even though
now we've actually seen this. Let me give you an example of how this works. We were contacted about a gentleman who was trying to advocate for his brother in the emergency room, and they were giving him all kinds of hassle. All he was doing was asking a question about his brother, about medication, and said, I just have a couple of questions, doctor, about this and that. The security of the hospital was called on this gentleman, and he was about to be escorted as I was on the phone with him. And I said, he goes, what's going on? I don't know. They just walked in. The police just walked in. And I said, well, that's inappropriate. You weren't being confrontational to the point of harming somebody or a threat of harm. You were just in a calm, because I know this gentleman, he's a very calm person. And this is the bullying kind of tactic that they'll use. They will call security, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be thrown out. I don't want to be hauled out, which I've seen people that I've been advocating for. They actually literally were picked up by their arms and legs and hauled out of the hospital, and to leave that patient alone and defenseless by themselves. Mm-hmm. So what happened? I said, look, I am actually somewhere away from my computer, but let me get on my phone. I'm going to send you some documents. This is really important. You need to have these documents filled out quickly. Well, how long did it take before this situation completely 180 in the direct favor of the patient? Not very long. Tell them how it ended, Greta.
Yeah, he ended up calling and saying, Greta, my brother's getting treated better than any patient in this hospital, probably better than any patient in any hospital. It's just amazing how well he's being treated right now, because they saw what these documents meant, and they didn't even want to challenge it.
That's great. That's great. That truly is a solution.
They even, because nobody would cop to who actually picked up the phone and called for security. They said, the hospital is opening up an investigation to find out who made that call to security. Had we heard anything like this working during COVID? No. This is what people need to do before they think they need it. The time to look for the fire extinguisher isn't after your house is half burned down. And it's been frustrating, because I've wanted to help people, but I can't, I'm not here to coerce people into doing things or going against their will. I respect people's free will, but I am, as a Christian who cares about people, I am really suggesting strongly that you please take a look at this. Please do it. But everybody has free will. They have to do it themselves. They have to do the preparation.
If you care about your own health, this is the best thing to do. I used to tell Jeremiah when he was younger, only you can take care of your health. Only you can take care of your health. If you really care about your health and you want to live, this is what you need to do right now, today. Don't wait. Do it today and get it signed. It's simple, and it's ourpatientrights.com. I would do it for your mother, your father, your children, whoever you love. I would do it today, get it done the way that you're supposed to get it. It's simple, and it's right there clearly laid out. I just thank you ladies so much. And I'm so thankful. I wish I had this before Rob got hospitalized. It would have saved his life. And so, I know he didn't die in vain, and maybe this is part of the plan from the beginning, and I have to believe in destiny. And so all of his audience, I want them to know that this is how you're going to stay out of death's door. Go ahead, Laura.
Can I say one last thing?
Sure.
So the thing that's the biggest threat, I believe, in my opinion, it is going into the hospital and getting a COVID experimental injection, in my opinion, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. That's not just crazy ideas at this point. That if you are in a certain age range and you are a male in particular, we're finding that the 18 to 20 something, 30 something, in that age range are extremely susceptible to myocarditis as an adverse effect of the injection, and other be very life compromising. And if you're 18-year-olds, I'm talking to parents out there that have 18, 19, 20-year-olds. They have to make their own decision. They're adults. So you might want to have this conversation with them that, hey, if you didn't want this thing, you didn't want this injection, and you were to go to the hospital for like an appendicitis, that's a real reason to go, or diverticulitis, or any other like life-threatening severe thing. Say you had a chainsaw accident and you need to go to the emergency room. Young, healthy males, they take some risk. They might need an emergency room. I know my son was doing all kinds of risky things with motorcycles and skiing, and well, they might be at risk of going to the emergency room and getting a COVID vax they didn't want. And so this is a way for them to prepare before they ever go in and to be covered.
I agree.
In my opinion.
Yeah, for emergency care. It's not just, it's for anything.
This isn't just COVID. So this
is not just COVID
discussion anymore. This is about how do you navigate the hospital system and have your informed consent wishes respected. I tell you what, that doctor now has a contract between you and him. He knows that and he knows that the hospital's been noticed, and he knows that it's his bacon on the line for him to do something intentionally against your wishes. So it's to me, this is the absolute best thing you could do to help prevent a disaster in a hospital, to the best of your ability. I mean, obviously there's things that could be accidental, but this is intentional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this situation is not just right. And this situation is not just going to go away because people have forgotten about COVID. I mean, this is something that is only going to be corrected by us, we the people, taking back and empowering ourselves and asserting our patient rights. This is the only way to protect yourself, really, and to take that control back. Because what we did is we gave it over to somebody in a white coat that we trusted for so long, and then that came back to really harm us. That first off, put your trust in God, no man. And second off, be prepared, because we've seen throughout this whole situation that man can be manipulated and persuaded to do all types of things. So protect yourself.
And I want to tell some people who may be listening to this and not know what we're talking about, because I didn't know my local hospital had turned into a kill shelter. I didn't know that. And so they're not the same as they used to be. I've taken people to the ER for, my dad needed a pacemaker, and they were life-saving. But today, they're not life-saving places. And unfortunately, you kind of have to do this, or you're going to end up going down the path that I went down. And the thing is, if it hasn't happened to you, I'm glad that you're hearing this beforehand. I wish I had heard this before I lost my husband. But I want people to know that may think this is crazy, that at least the hospital that I've been to and all the ones that you seem to be experiencing, they're not the same hospitals that they used to be. They're different. And so this is critical information that you need to have in your hands, and have a team of people that can help you get it in the hands of the people that are caring for you before you go to the hospital. So thank you.
Exactly to your point, Sheila, that I was helping somebody who had called and said, we're delivered to the hospital, the Advocate. She's there by an ambulance to the hospital, low oxygen. It dropped in the 60s. Just had surgery, maybe a couple of weeks prior, and it was maybe not so COVID related, to sudden drop in the oxygen levels in the 60s, and more to do with maybe a pulmonary embolism, right? That's something that's emergency situation. They dinked around in the emergency room with this person. They bullied her. They tried to coerce her into being separated from her, having to a higher level in the hospital, a different floor, separated from her Advocate. I was on the phone from the moment she got to the ER. For 24 hours, I was on the phone with her. She survived. Let me tell you how she did it. After the nurse had taken the phone out of her hands several hours later and disconnected the call and walked across the room with her personal possession, her phone, they said, security, haul out that person that I mentioned earlier, the 90-some pound woman, hauled the Advocate out. The patient's there alone. The patient had known this kind of behavior. She may have been subjected to it because she had conversations with friends. So what happened was, she, of her own free will, after several hours of not getting a test result back for blood clots, something that could have been resulted within at least an hour or two, reasonably. She had been in there for hours. They refused to give her that result. She left against medical advice, walked out of the hospital. They told her she was going to die if she did that. She met her friend, who was now outside the hospital because security prevented her from coming back in. She got in the car. She went to another hospital. The other hospital did the right thing. So I'm telling you, there are some hospitals and some good people still in the hospital system, but you never know which ones they are, who's working that shift. I'm going to kudos to the Dallas hospital that took care of her pulmonary embolism. Almost 24 hours later, she had that treatment, that life-saving TPA treatment that broke up the clot, and she was home within 48 hours of that treatment. And she's alive now.
I'd like to know which hospital, if you could tell me what Dallas hospital. We're in Dallas area.
Well, the thing is, I could tell you which hospital. I could tell you both names. The hospital that she first went into was Dallas Presby. There's a lot of hospitals in the same. Not sure what the address was, specific address that was. And now that hospital may have had somebody do the right thing. Depending on who was on staff that day that you're in, why roll the dice though, right? She went across town, went to UT Southwestern. Kudos to the doctor, I don't remember his name, that actually was on the phone with my team and vetted to make sure that his reason to ever put her on a ventilator was really a emergency situation, not COVID situation. We didn't want any monkey shines. We didn't want her to, as she's undergoing a treatment and unconscious, to then start the COVID protocol on her. And so anyway, he assured us that no, he would need to fit this criteria. And I trusted him. I believe he was probably in my opinion, he was wanting do the right, and this is just an intuitive thing. I believe that he was probably had a connection with God and wouldn't do that. She got the treatment that she UT Southwestern from this doctor, and she's alive and fine, not COVID, in a hospital still languishing on a ventilator. And it was because one hospital did something, in my opinion, inappropriate, and the other hospital exactly the thing, treated an emergency as an emergency and provided the care she needed. But why risk?
Right, and she says hospital, but really it's in the hand of the doctor. It's in the hand of the attending physician. I mean, it was up to that doctor to give the test hospital.
But this doctor did the right thing at the second hospital. The prior one, she believes she would die.
But the doctors are getting information from the hospitals they work at. They're contractors for the hospital. And it's crazy that you say UT Southwestern, because I had a local pharmacist while I was picking up medication for somebody else say that nobody who was vaccinated was put on a ventilator. I found that odd. And then he also told me UT Southwestern didn't put anybody on a ventilator because it's a training hospital. So that's interesting that you say that hospital name, because and he also gave this man a drug, and it was to lower his testosterone level, which that's the first I had heard, because we were told that during this particular time that it targeted men who had high testosterone. Have you heard of that?
No,
I haven't heard of that.
I didn't.
But I just wanted to say, whether they get information or not from the hospital, which the hospital is administration, they're not medical doctors, they're not in that direct relationship, patient relationship with the patient. They are just administration side to actually run the building and the things like that. They should not be directing the doctor in any way the treatment care of any patient. Any patient at all. That is directly between, it's a doctor-patient relationship. That's it. It's not doctor-hospital, it's not doctor-politician. It's a doctor-patient relationship. And in the end, they are the ones that went to medical school. They are the ones that were taught about informed consent, which is what they must be giving. It's an obligation per the AMA that they should give patients informed consent. And they are the ones who ultimately make the decision in the end. So I don't care how much pressure they got from a politician, from the media, from the hospital, from Fauci, from whoever. In the end, it is a decision between the patient and the doctor, and ultimately the patient, if they give consent to any type of treatment. And that did not happen during COVID, which was completely wrong. And the blame has really tried to be placed everywhere, but in reality, the blame lays squarely on the doctor for not adhering to his obligation and his oath as a doctor.
Right. I was just going to say, getting the threat of being fired is a lame excuse. I don't want to hear another, especially Christians, I don't want to hear another comment from a Christian saying, well, my friend works in a hospital, and they said that they would get fired if they didn't do it. Are you saying that person's life, the patients that you serve, and you had a duty to, you had an obligation to God to do anything to harm somebody, much less the Hippocratic Oath. I mean, your higher standard is God, but you use that as an excuse that you could get fired if you didn't do this or that. You willfully disregard someone's informed consent. I'm done with it. I'm really, there's no excuse. I don't care if Tedros is standing right there next.
Right. Here's the thing. I heard, I've heard many times, I actually had a lady, she was defending her son-in-law who was a doctor, and she said, well, if my son-in-law went against the hospital, he would have lost his job, and he has a family to feed. And I said, hold on. I said, there's a lady that I know that now has a family of 4 little boys, at that time under the age of 12, to take care of all alone, and those babies don't have a dad anymore. She doesn't have a husband anymore. She has no support and has to raise these kids all by herself. And you're telling me that is not as severe as your son-in-law losing his comfort level and status at the hospital, where he can go get another job anytime. He can even take a different profession completely. I don't care. He's not going to be living under a bridge. I mean, let's face it. He just did not want to lose that comfort level of lifestyle, and he wanted to maintain the status quo, just go along to get along. Whereas this woman has lost everything, you know, and these kids don't have a father at a time that when they need a male, you know, role model in their life. They need their dad, and that can't be replaced. You can get another job, you can't get another human life.
So all the doctors that were not listening to the patient and not listening to the families, was it just greed? Was it just greed, or how? I want to someday find the paperwork. I don't know when the switch was flipped in those hospitals, but they had to have gotten some money. Some were pushing it harder
Yes.
than others. How does that work, and how do they get away with it?
Well, we know that the COVID injection, these vaccines are incentivized. There is money attached. They're not giving them away for free.
So are the doctors getting a kickback? Because I know there's an incentive for COVID diagnosis. There's a incentive for a ventilator, even if you say you don't want one. There's an incentive to put COVID on your death certificate. So I know that's going to the hospital. The hospitals were given billions of dollars. Do the doctors get some of that? They must, because why do they keep doing it?
Well, I don't know, but I think that in my opinion, a big driver is you don't want to lose your hospital privileges. You know, a lot of these doctors, it's a stain, reputational stain to lose privileges. Look what Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, a fierce warrior, patient advocate. She has taken a lot of heat, unnecessary abuse, in my opinion. It's abuse to be. She's been denigrated on social media. The hospital has had statements against her that her privileges. She was doing the right thing. She was out there trying to save lives, give early treatment. I believe she was part of Sheriff, what is his name? A sheriff in Houston who actually was on a ventilator, came off the ventilator, went home. She was part of that rescue. And we see the repercussions professionally that these doctors who did take a stand, they don't want unnecessary. A lot of doctors cower. They're cowards. They cowered. They literally took care of themselves and their own family, but they wouldn't extend that to anybody else because they didn't want the repercussions. There's a lot of very handsy, selfish, self-centered doctors out there. Let me just tell you, as a profession, I've lost a lot of respect. The ones who get my respect are the ones who you hear about have taken a lot of heat because they did the right thing. And doctors, if you're out there and you're even watching, do the right thing. You're gonna, if you don't want to do the right thing, if somebody comes in with this paperwork, like it or not, you're gonna have to make a choice. Lose your job by going along and serving your master, the administration, because they're encouraging you to do a certain thing as a business, to push a certain product because it's their business model, or you'll respect the patient's wishes, which have been served to you in writing, notarized, sent legally, and possibly have a board complaint. You choose. Please do the right thing.
One more thing I think we should do, and it could be a team effort, or I know so many people, like when Rob was sick, went to the American Frontline website, found a telemed person, got the medications. We need to get this into their hands, because if they hadn't told me go to the ER, I probably wouldn't have gone to the ER. They don't. I want to call them back and tell them my husband's dead now. How many people did you send to the ER? Because they're not hospitals anymore. They're kill shelters. I think they need to have this information, and I don't know if you guys have gone down that route yet or not, but I think that those are the people that should really have this. If people don't do this and they don't know about it, you know, sometimes they look to the frontline doctors. Have y'all done anything with that?
I have. I thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. Because we are desperate. Other than Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, it's the ones who seem to take the most heat. Dr. Sheila was on the what?
Saving lives is not good for their business. So yeah, I get it.
Right. So, for some reason, there's certain groups in the health freedom movements that are not that excited for a solution.
Mm-hmm.
I'm calling them out right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you would like to save some lives and be part of a solution that Dr. Mercola, who is very renowned, he has been a patient advocate for over 30 years, endorses Senator Bob Hall, the only senator in the state of Texas that went against the shielding. He voted against it. He was the only one standalone patient, truly a fierce patient advocate, endorses this document and our work. Mary Talley Bowden had over 200,000 views on this single tweet that she put out about this document endorsing it. If you, doctor, nurse that works for a doctor, want this solution, if you're part of the health freedom, patriot, freedom, truther, whatever, I don't care whatever name you cite, you're interested in a true solution, one that's endorsed by Dr. Mercola, one of the fiercest patient advocates for over 30 years, endorsed by Senator Bob Hall, endorsed by Mary Talley Bowden in Houston, who has been a fierce champion of patient rights and a huge informed consent champion. If you want to be part of a solution that will keep people safe in hospitals, then contact me. I'm happy to explain it. I'm happy to get you a copy. You can get your own copy at ourpatientrights.com, or you can contact me and we'll have a conversation. Get us on your platform. Get us on your podcast. We don't sell anything that might be a problem for you. You're not going to get a 10% affiliate link. You're not going to get any profit from this problem. But I hope it's not. I hope there's somebody who's moral and cares about people, actually use their podcast like you are, Sheila, who's not looking for a way to preserve their gravy train. This may sound a little confrontational, but I'm going to call out what's happened for 3 years, because I was on the phone at 2:00 in the morning talking to people who were desperate, scared. The woman who is now living from hotel to hotel, who was living for 10 weeks out of her car, clutching a 10-pound bag of ice because she was advocating strongly for her husband. Nobody was there. No frontline doctors were there to help her. There was nobody there advocating for her. I was on the phone in the last days with her, fighting for her husband. Okay, she is destitute financially now. About that 77-year-old widow. I could care less about your esteemed degrees and your best-selling books if you're not doing a thing for the patient.
Right.
Then you're useless. You're useless to people.
Right.
Fight for them.
Right.
I'm happy to talk to the good doctors, the ones who care about people. Christian doctors, step up. Step up. Get this document. Give it to your patient list. Go to your churches, but churches have been useless. They have not been vocal. They have not cared. In my opinion, I haven't seen a single one reach out and say, how can we get this information to people? Maybe there's one out there. Maybe you're a home church. Maybe you're just somebody who cares and gives a darn. Please reach out, go to the website, download a copy, make copies. We're not monetizing it. We're not even copywriting it. Use it. It's free. If you're not doing that, then it tells me what side you're on.
And if you've lost somebody like I have, get the call back the telemed people that gave you the medication. Tell them you lost your loved one, and tell them about the solution. That's what I'm going to do. I haven't called them and told them that I lost my husband.
Sheila, you're not the only one that experienced that. I've heard that before.
I mean, frontline doctors were trusted. The frontline name was on their information. They should have this right now. I mean, if this...
Where are they?
They were directed
Are they just
to go
talking? Are they just on stages? Look, okay. Are you just on stages making speeches? The same speech over and over and over about how wonderful you were 3 years ago to start a group?
It's time for the solution.
Right
Amen.
There are thousands of people in hospitals right now that need this. Thousands. Right now. Is it because it's not flashing and newsy? There's not, interest in it anymore?
This doesn't have anything to do with COVID, though, because they've been killing people for years in hospitals.
Yeah.
My husband and I only had it for emergency care. Forget COVID. This has to do with life. And if you have an emergency and you don't have this, you're probably going to end up dead. Rob knew all this. He knew all this deep darkness of COVID, but this doesn't have anything to do with that today. This has to do with the system and the way that it's set up. You need this to stay alive.
Right.
I'm just going to give an open invitation. Tucker Carlson, Dan Bongino, Newsmax, anybody with a lot of influence, OAN, these larger platforms. And the reason why I'm appealing to them and smaller platforms like yourself, Sheila, you're a champion of people. These larger platforms that literally can reach millions, which Dr. Mercola said this needs to get out to millions of people.
It does.
Why are they not talking about a solution? Instead, talking about the problem 3 years ago and blaming people who the patient no relationship with. They don't never to have a conversation with Tedros at the frozen food at the grocery store. Hey, you're the guy. No, they will never do that. They will talk to the doctor because the doctor is the only one with a medical license who had anything to do with your care and ordering something you didn't want and possibly killing your loved one.
Yeah. So, and we encourage every platform out there to contact us because you now have the opportunity to be part of the solution. And in my personal belief, this is going to get out there. God will make sure it gets out there because every person wants that chance to be alive. And as soon as people hear about it and understand about it, they're going to take that initiative. So you can either be part of the solution or you can keep pushing the problem for your own agenda. But at this point, 3 years into it, we've all had enough. We need the solution, and we're asking that you help us join in that.
Perfectly said. And good doctors want it. Good doctors are saying thank you. Good doctors are saying thank you for making it so clear what the patient wants and doesn't want. That way, I'm covered. I'm covered. I know what that patient wanted and didn't want. Maybe there's a chance that it didn't get noted right in a record or misheard, or there's just some ambiguity. There's no ambiguity. And good doctors appreciate having good, concise, clear communication, and having it in writing does that. So they're happy. Good doctors are excited about this document because they finally have something to say to the administration in hand. Look, it's in the medical record. I'm not gonna do it. It's going against their right to informed consent for the American Medical Association, and I'm not gonna violate that. And it kind of gives them a way to push back against people who own the business, the hospital, those paper pushers, against to push back and do the right thing.
Well, I'm going to be connecting you with some of the people that I've been talking to about my book because they need to hear it. Weaponized News. These are all alternative people, and really that's where you're going to get your real people are these alternative outlets. So anybody that I talk to, I'm going to be sending them your way. I think they would love the information. If you love saving lives, if you want to see people live, this is the solution. So be expecting some phone calls, and I just salute both of you for staying on the track and not giving up and helping all those people who were in crisis. And now designing this is a godsend. Thank you.
It is a God idea. It is truly straight from God. And
thank
we're
you
so
for
grateful.
helping us share this.
Yes, thank you.
So glad that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to talk about a solution. Appreciate you taking the time and giving us the opportunity to discuss it.
Well, hopefully it will go far and wide. This may be my first one that I actually try to stream live and then take it down and then stream it live. I mean, I don't know. I may edit that part out, but you know what I mean. We're just learning how to get it out. You have to be kind of stealth, with these kind of messages. It is mind-boggling how you doctors wouldn't want to do it, but I think there's something nefarious at the top, and I think that together we're better. So maybe it's good that you're on these smaller platforms to stay off the radar. I mean, I always keep my head on a swivel anyway. That's what my husband always said. So, I'm just so thankful for both of you, and I just appreciate everything that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for being on Skiba News Nation.
I'm so sorry for what happened to Rob. And we both have a mutual friend, Spencer Bennett.
Spencer Bennett, yeah.
Yeah, and
your brother texted Rob on the 6th before he was intubated, and I guess he was being harassed every hour. They gave him remdesivir in his sleep. I mean, it's barbaric what they've done, but I'll just share this one little last story. It's in the book. It's the last couple of pages. Is we searched the record so many times for the signature. My husband was very serious about signing his name on anything. He would have had to read every single line. So after looking at this 5,000 record document twice, I got 2 different records. One of them had more pages. There's no signature. There's just a squiggly line 3 times. And Jeremiah said,
"It's not his signature. It wasn't his signature.
It wasn't his signature. It wasn't my signature." So we go up to the hospital. There's a little box of a name, her name. So we just kind of nonchalantly go up there and ask for her, you know. And anyway,
we're wearing spy glasses, and that's true.
Yeah. So anyway, we just asked, can we talk to this lady? She signed this document as a witness to my husband's consent, and she said her supervisor came in, and then she said first, so maybe he was incoherent, and that didn't make sense because if he was incoherent, they should have asked me.
When he was texting you after that.
Yeah, he was calling me and texting me. Where's the punchline?
Verbal?
Yeah. This is what they signed as consent. They put verbal on 3 different documents, the word verbal. And so she admitted that she did it, this lady, and she put verbal on all 3 documents, the PHI, there's 3 of them. And she said
they had to have proof that he actually did it, so they were looking for the audio
recording, which they never did.
Yeah, they're like, I'm sorry to inform you that we can't find it.
Yeah, the investigation they did found nothing, and I don't know that this even matters because I don't think it does at this point. But they sent me 2 letters admitting that they had to re-educate their whole staff on how to handle this. It's kind of weird that they put it in writing. It's in the book, but it's just insanity. I mean, they just put verbal three times. This one lady.
And so this document takes care of all of that. There would be no question about it.
And I totally agree.
And I wished I had it before, I went into I thought I was an informed person because I was studying the VAERS data.
Rob did too.
I was studying, I was studying the ventilator. I was telling my pulmonologist about the VAERS data, and she asked me, well, what is this VAERS? I've never heard of it before. And she was trying to tell me the data. And I was like, well, how can you tell me data when you don't even know where to get it? I said, you don't know anything about the COVID data, the vaccine data. I know more than you. And, we just fought constantly every day.
I think my husband went down punching personally. You weren't ventilated though, right?
No, I was fortunate because at that time, our Senator Bob Hall had just passed a bill to where you could have one loved one in the hospital with you. I didn't even know about this bill at the time. I just thought it was strange that my husband was allowed in. And so he was allowed in at visiting hours from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
What month was this? What month and year?
It was August of 21. It had, just passed this bill. And so he was able to be in there. And so he was a witness to it. And my pulmonologist actually said, well, about 3 days after arguing with her, she said, well, I can tell that you and your husband are both very well educated. And I thought, what does that matter? That my education level has nothing to do with how you are going to treat me. And then in retrospect, I see it did have everything to do with how they were treating me. They knew that I wasn't going to be ventilated because I told her, I said, you're killing people with the ventilators. And she didn't deny it, So that right there, she knew not to touch that subject. So then she went into the vaccine push. Mm-hmm. And then once I knew all the data about that, she was just every day she left my room frustrated.
Well, that's what Rob was doing. And he said all the doctors are disagreeing with me. And he even put the mRNA was against his spiritual beliefs. He literally had the strength to put that in his document. He was wearing a bracelet that said, do not intubate. So I think he went down punching, to tell you the truth. Yeah. He was probably pissing those doctors off because he was holding his ground, but he was also coughing. So they starved him into submission. They isolated him. They badgered him. You can read in the record over and over and over every hour somebody was coming in saying, you need a ventilator. He was like, no, I don't. I'm either going to get better or worse. It's clear as day in the record. But anyway, I just don't want anybody else to have to go through this. And now you have the solution.
People had to escape. That's why I call it a hospital hostage hotline, which
so
I hope
sad.
People don't even need to call that ever again for being in a hospital. Just do the work before to prepare, and then you don't need me. I want to be obsolete, Sheila. I don't want to have to do this or do this for anybody. I don't want anybody needing it. But literally, the people who got out, it seemed like that one of them in particular, he was an elderly, he was like in his 70s, and he literally had to leave the hospital in his hospital gown with a catheter attached to his privates. They
Just to
refused
get
to
out.
take that off just to get out. And he went, it was very risky to the son who I was talking with through advocacy for him to do that, to make that decision. I said, you got to get him out. And he left. He said, but I don't want him to die at home. I said, treat him at home. If they're not giving him in the hospital, treat him. They were fast tracking this guy towards the ventilator. He acquired pneumonia after being in the hospital, and so he was going down quick. They weren't feeding him. He lost body weight. He started getting some delirium from, like that ICU delirium, ICU acquired delirium. So he goes home and he gets treated, and he had to find somebody. He had to navigate the things outside the hospital, which they burden you with that. How do I deal with the catheter? How do I do the nebulizer treatments at home? How do this is all new to me. I'm not a doctor. Anyway, I was basically on the phone with this guy around the clock because he needed the treatments every couple hours, and I didn't want him to fall asleep. The son. I'd call him and go, wake him up. He's got to follow the instructions per the doctor that prescribed the budesonide outside the hospital. You've got to stay on track. But anyway, it's been a fight helping people for the last 3 years. And I really am so hopeful that this document's going to change the culture, not just save lives, but it's going to change the culture in hospitals. They are going to start respecting consent like they never did before.
Oh yeah, see, they should be on the defense. We should be on the offense. That's how I see it. They should be afraid of us. And I believe next year everybody will know about this, and I hope you get connected with the frontline American doctors. Anybody who is listed as a reference to give people telemed, whatever, they need to have this. And if they don't have this, they don't need to be on that list. Because, I thought frontline doctors were for life, and they sent me to a kill shelter. So I'm going to call them, and I'm going to, I'll share your information with them, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much.
Y'all keep up the good work, and thank you.
Thank you.